Um, Welcome to another episode of the 12 Stones podcast. I'm Deborah. Here with us today is my mom, Gretchen, and Wanetta and Kevin Bright, the owners of the Small and Civil War Cave in Ozark, Missouri. And
we're here to talk about the library, basically, and all the activism that's been going on over the last couple of years to keep our children safe.
Right.
So.
Yep. The Brights are, kind of people who've been actively involved and actively speaking out. So we knew that it was important to talk to them and
get their perspective.
Yeah.
I have so first off, just for our audience, when did you first hear about the library? How did you first hear about it? And what did you first hear about it? So just kind of...
Well, the relationship with the library kind of started with Wanetta,
Well, with
before we
Eileen.
ever even moved to Ozark.
Yes, and I'm not going to mention any names, but it actually started whenever Eileen told me, because she's a homeschool mom, and the thing about being a homeschool mom, because most of the time you are staying at home and taking care of the kids, you've got, one paycheck paying for everything, and because unfortunately homeschool moms and dads end up having to pay twice for school, which is ridiculous. The money needs to follow the child, just saying. But because of that, a lot of homeschool moms have to use the library. And this was several years ago. This was probably 4 years ago. I'm not sure exactly how long. But she called me one day and she said, "Mom, there are some books that are not good. Just showing, some books that you wouldn't expect to be in the Christian County Library."
This was 4 years ago?
It was probably 4 years ago.
Wow.
It was when Lynn was our representative, because I actually called him. But she told me about some of the books, and there were some very sexual books. And again, I don't have an axe to grind like Eilena. I don't want anything sexual placed in front of little kids, whether it's homosexual or heterosexual, honestly.
Right.
Why are we trying to sexualize our kids? Anyway, so she called me and she said, "Mom, I'm concerned." She said, there's some really racy books starting to show up, and she told me about them. She said, also, you're not going to believe who is now the director. I believe she was actually the director of one of the libraries. And again, I'm not going to mention any names. I'm not going to do that. But I knew this person because I had dealt with her before. She was a college student whenever I was working at a business, which I also will not name. But I was working there. I was a supervisor over a crew of about probably 21 people, most of them young and college age. And how I became acquainted with this person is she worked for a contracting outfit, and they would often those contractors would come into our break room. So basically she was in my space. And I began to notice that there were a lot of things happening in the break room. I would come in, the lights would be off, there would be all kinds of, they would stick weird movies in, there would be stuff going on, and I began to notice that she was something that I found out from my daughter is she told me that this girl, she knew who she was, and at that time she was a college student, but she was involved in, I'm not exactly what type of club it was, but it was a sexually based type of club in her school.
Wow.
And
what school?
I believe it was...
Was it a high school or college? That's all I want to know.
It was a college.
It was a college.
It was a college. But there started to be parties going on.
Whoa.
And my young people at my place of work started ending up going to these parties. And there was alternative sexual stuff going on. I became aware of this. I was also aware that they would sometimes show up inebriated.
To work?
There was stuff going on, and I became extremely concerned, and before it was all over with, and again, I'm not going to say who I worked for, but I literally had to go and file a complaint at Human Resources, and literally got them thrown out of our break room. And it was a long process, but it was a mess. So I was very aware when I heard that this person had been hired by the library as, I believe, a director. I was flabbergasted. And I immediately got on, of course, at that time she was out of college and she was older. And I immediately called Lynn, Lynn Morris was our representative. And I said, Lynn, who hired this person? Do you know who this is? And Lynn's like, I really don't know a whole lot about that, Wanetta. That's the commissioners. And he said, I just don't know a whole lot about it. I don't. And I told him what was going on. I told him what was showing up in the library, that I was suspicious that this person had something to do with it, of course. And he said, Wanetta, I have to tell you, I don't have any power over that at this point. He said, the best thing you could do is try to talk to the commissioners. I don't know as far as the hiring process or the appointing process. He said, at this point, I'm not sure how that works, but he said that'd be the only avenue that I would be able to point you toward.
What time frame was this? Like what year?
This was several years ago, and again, I wasn't quite ready for that question, so I don't know.
Okay.
I would have to ask Eilina, and because she remembers more when it was.
Okay.
But anyway, the next time this person shows up on my radar is this, whenever this happened. So this was when I became aware, and I even called. I called, and I spoke to him, and she didn't know who I was. But I spoke to her and I said, so I just questioned her about the books. And, well, who's ordering the books? Are there any, is it just one person? Is it multiple people? What's going on with your book ordering? Are you equally representing other people, or are you just representing? And of course, she was very just kind of talking in circles. Well, there really aren't any bad books. And the answer to a bad book is a good book. And I thought, oh my goodness, yes, this is the person I remember. Okay.
Wow.
So
moral equivalence.
Yeah.
Real moral equivalence.
But of course, that's what the ALA, if you read the ALA stuff, that's
sure.
very much that's why that needs to be done away with too. Because that does not reflect who we are in Christian County.
No.
And again, I don't have a problem. I know that there's probably 20 to 25% of them that people in our county that pay taxes. I understand if they want to order books. I understand if they want to borrow books, if they get them from somewhere else. I understand there are going to be some of those books, but they need to be displayed appropriately, and you do not need to have an over-representation of that type of stuff, especially if it's not just blatantly in the children's section.
Right. Well,
That's
it's a
wrong.
blatant indoctrination of children. It's
Very
a blatant
much so.
early sexualization of children, and
Yes.
it's actually ultimately it's a Marxist technique.
Very much so.
To destabilize families, children, and ultimately it's a
Very
revolution
much so.
against our country. So
Yeah. And-
people have a hard time putting those dots together, but if you do enough,
Yeah, when you've dived as deep as we all have and
Oh, yes.
why this is happening and what's going on, and
Yes.
then you see that there's
Yeah.
a bigger picture.
And if they're going to have any of those, if adults are going to read what adults read, but the thing that we keep saying is, why in the world don't put them in front of those children?
Right.
Put them somewhere where the adults know where they're at. They can get them freely, but you keep them away from kids, and that way moms know this is the adult section. This is not where I need to allow my kids to be browsing. So anyway, Eilina and I tried to figure out what to do. It was very hard at that point. We had some different commissioners at that point. And it just didn't seem like, like I said, we made some phone calls, but it didn't really lead to anything. It was just us. It was basically just us. And I can remember one of the calls, and somebody goes, "Did you call yesterday?" They literally were pinpointing that it was just us. So obviously, at that point, it wasn't time. It's time now.
Right. That's an interesting point.
Yes.
Very interesting point.
Yes.
So, Kevin, this just interests me. What convicted you to want to do something? You know, where does your conviction come from to actually get involved in something that we know, as we all know, it causes huge ripples in the, atmosphere?
Well, I guess Wanetta and I, we've always been involved in ministry, and we've been involved in youth ministry over the years, and the harm that comes to kids. And I was a youth specialist for a while. I actually worked for the state for a little while, and when you see what's going on around you, you begin to see the root cause and where it comes from. It's not hard to recognize. And the motives are always confusing, and if you try to make sense out of it, then you're just you just go in circles. But just a simple way of putting it, when evil shows up, you have to face it. You have to stop evil, because it will not stop. It seems like the goal every time. It's just something that's really hard to communicate. But evil, when it comes, it is not satisfied. And Satan, I'll just go ahead and just go to the source. But Satan himself, he will never be satisfied. He's been found guilty. He's been convicted. He's had a trial, and he is doomed to eternity in hell. That's the big picture. But the details along the way, he just does everything he can to take everybody with him. And the children always wind up being grabbed. And, I don't think most of these people realize what they're a part of. I'm not saying all these people are bad people. It's just evil, and evil is very deceptive. And evil comes in, and Satan, he's a liar, he's a deceiver, and his role and what he tries to do is he tries to kill and he tries to destroy. He does not have the ability to build or create anything. The choices he's made, I can, once when I was younger, I would ponder those things, but I've come to the point now where I just accept it and know that's what it is. And my concern is always not just for, of course, for the children, but the people that get involved in these things. Like I said, I don't think they're bad to start with, but they get drug into this and they begin to see the world through cloudy vision. And anyone that comes to the point where they think that it's okay to take any of this vulgar sexual stuff and place it in front of a child, there's something not right. And I guess that's my conviction, is to try to reach those people, because it's not just these children, it's those people too. You know what? They are victims as well. And it's my role, and I'm a believer, and the Bible tells me, and God lays it on my heart, that I'm supposed to try to share the good news with these people, that there is hope, there is good things, and there is a future for all of us. And we can't be doing these things because it just causes harm.
I'm so glad you said that, because as I've been involved in this over the last, 18 to 20 months, I've had to grow, because I was super angry at first. I was really angry. Mm-hmm. And I still get angry at times when, it gets in your face. But I've gotten to a point now where I can see the deception. And so we're all deceived to a certain extent. And so
yes.
It's much easier for me to not be angry and to pray for everybody involved, those who are doing yes. wrong, directly in the library, those who are, attempting to support those who are doing wrong in the library,
yes.
and everybody involved, those who are neutral even, because neutral is, to not say anything is to give consent, really. So,
yes.
But I'm glad you said that.
I agree.
One young lady really touched my heart, and I don't think she was of age, so I'm not sure if I should say anything, but she really impressed me because she got up and spoke. And it takes a lot of nerve to get up and speak in front of a bunch of people, especially in one of those library board meetings. That's not a comfortable area, and you're not sure who you're talking to. But she got up there and she quoted scriptures, and she has been told, and she taught, and she quoted about the love of God. And that love that God has for everybody, and how awesome that she has that that she's drawn to that, and that she's heard that, and I assume that she knows she has felt God's love. But that love is not always just, well, we just let everybody do everything they want to. If you've got a 2-year-old and you've got a wood stove in the living room, the last thing you want to do is you'll wind up with a scar like Wanetta has here on her arm because her brother tripped her on accident and she fell on that. That wound up being a really traumatic circumstance. But, no doubt everybody around felt guilty and felt bad. But love, a lot of times, is trying to prevent somebody from harming themselves. And you can't let a 2-year-old just run around wild around a wood stove without having a burn come. And I guess that's kind of a far stretch for analogy for what's going on. But love is not just saying what you can do, but it's saying what'll harm you and what'll hurt you. And what, there's no good comes out of some things. And when you see there's no good comes out of something, then why in the world would you promote it or try to impose it on somebody else, especially a child?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So one thing that I've noticed is it seems like the employees of the library or people that get up and speak in opposition to removing the books or labeling the books or any of the other 101 solutions we've brought up. It seems like they want to pass the buck as far as accountability on who's accountable for having the books in there or who's accountable for kids seeing the books in the library.
Right.
That's the one key thing I've noticed is they don't want any accountability. So it's not my fault the books are there, and it's not my fault if your kid sees the book there.
Right.
Yeah, it's your fault because you
weren't watching
look at
your
every
kid.
single book your 2 or 3 kids were
Right.
looking at all at once or pulling off a shelf.
One of the first things, I think either you or Alina said it before I knew you guys' names or before we had met, was you said, if you have kids with multiple ages, how are you supposed to watch them all in the library, which I related to heavily because I have 5 children myself of varying ages. And if I'm helping the youngest one, I can't be there for the 12-year-old.
Right.
So, yeah, that was one of the things that spoke greatly to me.
Well, and I actually read that 3-minute speech just, I think it was like 2 months ago. Maybe it was last month. The months blend together.
They do, don't they?
My last point, because I had been going through the library freedom to read, all these policies that they've got, and they're ridiculous. And you're right, they go around in a circle. So nobody is really watching the kids because you can't. The thing that frustrated me was whenever Kevin and I, and I think we were with Echo, and we were waiting for the library to, the room to open, and we were back in the youth section. 12 years old to 18. And we were back there and we were literally shooed out and told that we should leave.
Wow.
Because, we want to make sure that they're able to enjoy without parents being around, without people being around. They don't have any right to tell the parents and grandparents who are there, I'm sorry, we pay a lot of money.
I agree.
Because of our business, we have to pay twice.
Right.
And I don't feel like I would be shooed out of anywhere.
I feel like
I'm
I am
a
pretty young adult, so I should be able to be in the young adult section.
Yeah, them and their rules, those need change. There needs to be some things changed.
Right.
Those stupid elderly policies.
Well, I think that one of the reasons why they have that rule is because they know that there are predators that go into those areas. And that's why I think they do.
I agree completely. There are other business models where obviously the library has a sign that says, I think, is it 9 and under, parental supervision is required or something like that?
Under 9.
Under 9. Yeah, there are business models, like a trampoline park, for example. You can't drop your kid off at Jumpland or wherever and then leave. And the library is somewhere where you can drop your kid off and then leave. Or they can walk there after school or whatever. And if that's the case, I think that should be away. I think that should be taken away. If you're going to have those books and then say it's our responsibility to watch, then the business model should be parents must be with their child at all times.
At all times.
At all times.
Yes,
because then the library should be responsible if a kid is 16 opens
Well,
up
they
and
are
sees pornography.
responsible for
No, I
it,
agree, but I'm
yeah.
just saying they're passing the buck.
Yes,
over and
that's
over.
what they're doing.
absolutely.
Yes, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too.
Right.
Unfortunately. So, Wanetta, I have a question. You you told me once that you are a reluctant warrior,
Mm-hmm.
and that it was not fun or easy for you to get up there and speak, and yet you did it. How did you do it? I mean, what?
Well, after, like I said, it had been a while since all that happened with the person which I knew. When Eileen came back to me, and this was when we started going to some of Kevin and I kind of had a wake up. In 2020, I became very ill with COVID. And we just sort of had I guess the scales kind of fell off of our eyes. And we knew, because I don't know that I would have survived. He literally stayed awake with me. My oxygen would drop to 40. I was on oxygen for a while. I was very ill. At one point, they almost checked me into the hospital, and it was hilarious. He checked himself in so that he could protect me from being checked in. He said, well, I've got COVID too, so I need an x-ray.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So he was my protector. Some of my memories from that time, I told him again last night as we were going out to eat, I said, thanks for making sure I didn't die. He said, you're a good cook. But we made up our mind at that point that it was time to really live. And it was time to put aside those fears and do something. The time that we have left on this earth, because we're not spring chickens, the time that we have left, we need to do something significant.
Wow.
Eileen approached us.
That's your
another
daughter.
time, yes.
Okay.
Eileen approached us, our daughter, and she said, I somehow got introduced to Mary Hernandez de Carl. Very, articulate lady. Oh my gosh, so smart. So at one point, and I don't know if it was at a We the People meeting or if it was at, it may have been met her somewhere with Eileen, I can't remember. But she started talking about the library, and she said, I've got a binder. She said, I've been taking pictures, and she said, do you want to see them? Well, at that point, Kevin, we did, and I can't remember if we saw the book first, but I remember Kevin said, you know what? If all this stuff is actually in the library, which obviously it is, he said, could you make us a binder? And we're going to start taking it around to people and showing it to them. Because once you see this stuff, you can't unsee it.
That's right.
100%.
And you really can't.
Yeah.
And that's biblical. God's going to hold you responsible if you see this stuff that's being put right out there in the kids section and you choose to not do anything about it, because he sees our hearts and he knows all things. So Mary did another Mary binder and gave it to us, and we took it to our pastor and the deacons. And
Were they shocked?
they were.
Yeah.
They were very shocked. And that kind of started the ball rolling. And now we have our cultural engagement meetings and stuff. But yes, what you're saying, to kind of get up to speed, I dread those meetings. I just hate them because, and I know it's something that I need to do because I have the ability to do it. But sometimes you just trust that God's going to protect you. There's times that I will just say, Father, cover it. Just cover it. And that's all I say is just cover it.
A breath prayer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so.
But your voice would tremble. You would get up there and your voice would tremble and you would be shaking, but you did it anyway.
Yes.
You don't do that now unless you're really angry. But you don't. You just get up there and you emote now. And so I think you're a great example for people who might think, oh, I can't get up there and
Yes.
do this. Get up
Yes.
there and do it afraid. And
Yes.
the second time you do it, you'll be less afraid. And the third time, I've gotten up there after, not having any problems for months. And then I'll go 1 month and I'll be shaking and afraid and my voice will break and I'll make mistakes. And I'll think, what in the world? But this is kind of a spiritual oppression that happens.
I was on the way home from a library meeting one night, and it was, God gave me, what you said this morning in church. You said, I just kind of had this, it just came to me. That was kind of what it was. God showed me kind of a vision of being inside of a house and telling me, get out of the house. I think so many people are scared to death over what's going on. And they're just looking out the window, scared to death of what's going on in the world, and they're just acting like nothing's going on, and just and just kind of living their life and thinking, well, I guess hopefully everything doesn't go to hell in a handbasket while I'm alive. Maybe I'll die and be gone by the time it does. But God basically, and it took me a while to fully sort out what he was telling me, but basically walk out the door and go to the nearest pile of trash, because for the last 50 years at least, people of that persuasion, very liberal people, and I laugh at the term liberal. You and I are from that same time period.
Right.
Liberals, whenever I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, they were libertarians, basically.
Right. Yeah.
The liberals now, they're not liberals.
No, they're communists.
They're
but they may
Marxists.
not
They're
know it.
Totalitarians.
Yeah, they may not understand that's what they are, but
Yes.
we've had a couple generations now of indoctrination in the schools, and
Absolutely.
so they're a lot of them are not for free speech.
Right.
They say and it's unbelievable. Even though you have here in the library, they're talking about the freedom to read and the Library Bill of Rights, and yet they want to shut down those who have a different point of view.
Oh, no. Absolutely. But I basically a vision of there's just a town with piles of trash that has been formed by these horrible policies and these people that are now in control of all these areas of influence. And they've just made a mess out of everything. But God told me, go to the nearest pile of trash, take a string, and start pulling, and tell others to do so.
Oh, interesting.
And that's what we all need to do. Get a string and start pulling. But first, you have to walk out of your house.
Yeah, it's like that joke, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time?
One bite at a time.
Yeah.
And, these people in the library, they seem to think we're going to go away. No. I laughed one day. I told Kevin, I said, I think they don't realize this is my new hobby. So I'm not going
I've joked about it as my monthly entertainment. People are not.
Well, it's not very entertaining.
No, I know,
but this is something that has to be completed.
Yeah.
And it will be.
Go ahead.
Something about what the goal and the mission and what we're all doing this for. There is a bigger purpose, and there is a bigger there's things that are bigger than us, and the whole circumstance that we're in kind of goes back to when we were kids, because we grew up in the first generation where prayer was taken out of the schools.
Yes.
The churches
we
began
started
to
in 65.
retreat, and when the church retreated and got out of the public eye, they started. It wasn't intentional. It just everybody just kind of drew back and kind of went where it was safe and stayed out of the problems. You had the '60s, and there was all kinds of strange things happened. But when the church retreated, they never did step back into that role of influencing the world. Our nation, people came here from Europe, and when they came here, they came because the government had literally destroyed their lives. So many of them lost everything, not once, not twice, but 3 or 4 times. They lost family members to come to a country where they could be free to worship and to raise their children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. And that simple thing, that is so opposed now, but that is the history of our country. That is the history of our documents. That is the history of our founding fathers, who they try to smear all the time.
They sure do.
But when you go back and you read, and you start reading those first-hand accounts, letters, correspondence, then you begin to realize that they'll take something like when it says our rights are endowed by our Creator. Well, everybody knew who the Creator was. And then in 1960, they started changing language. And I'm sure it was before that, but as language has changed, we almost need to get out and redefine who we are. And we need to be able to speak these things, because if we don't speak these things, they'll disappear. They've already shown that they're doing everything they can to silence us. And this goes back to, it's not them. This is evil, and this is Satan, and he is trying to crush the church. And this movement will never be satisfied until the church is gone.
That's right.
And God's
That's right.
people are silent.
And you see, the Marxists know that it's a spiritual battle.
That's right.
Because they actually are religious. They're
Yes.
religious with their ideology. It's a religion to them.
An alternative religion, yes.
Yes,
I
and
agree.
so they understand that it is a spiritual battle, much more so than many Christians understand that it's a spiritual battle.
Yes.
Right, and that's why they try and frame a lot of their arguments with that, by using scripture or by saying, what about freedom of speech, and trying to use some of the same arguments but twisted.
That's right.
Well, scripturally, God is not the author of confusion. That's the work of Satan. And
Right.
the confusion of language, changing terms, changing words, changing philosophies.
That's so true.
Little by little, they just nibble away at it, and before you know it, it's hard to recognize the truth anymore. And that's why it's so important for us as a church to step up, re-engage, start speaking the truth, and speak it boldly, and just continue to speak the truth, because the truth, you can't argue against the truth. You can scream at it, you can rage at it, and you can deny it, but the truth always stands, and that truth is so important, and that is we're the standard bearers for that. Are we perfect? No. Am I always truthful? No. I'll just be honest. I try to be, and when I'm not, I have to go ahead and apologize to the Creator. And everything hinges on that, because if our rights come from men, oh my goodness, look what a mess it is. But our rights and everything hinges on that greater power, God Almighty. Without Him, there is no standard that we can trust. I know myself well enough to know if they put me in charge of the world, I would not fix it. And it doesn't matter what leaders we get now. Yes, it's important. We have to choose our leaders. But it's not going to matter what leaders we get if the church does not step back up and God's people don't start re-engaging in the world, because we are the light. We're the salt. We're the light. And without us, well, you know what? We've got the book that tells us what it's going to be like. And to kind of take it to a Hollywood scene, Mad Max, when I saw that, it really began to dawn on me. That's what the world's going to be like without the church.
That's absolutely correct.
That's another thing that God told me at one time. And sometimes I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why. But there'll just be something on my heart, and it's just like a complete thought. And the day before, I was driving, going to the grocery store, and just kind of feeling like, where do you start? Where do you even start? This was one of those times we all get down. But I was thinking, man, it just seems overwhelming. Father, what do we do? Where do we even start? Where's the end of this going to be? And that night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and the statement was, all you have to do is raise up my standard. I'm going to do the rest.
That's right.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
When Jesus hung on the cross, He said, it's finished. And it is. It's finished. All that's left for us to do is to walk it out. We're not responsible for the results. All we're responsible for is to be faithful and to be true and be a witness of where the answer lies and where true love comes from.
That's wonderful.
That's true. He says we're going to be hated, so
Yes.
it's proven true.
Right,
for sure.
right. And speaking of that, you guys were talking about how you guys are not popular. You said that today, and wait, that's exactly how my life has been.
Yeah, she told me about that. I was like, that's relatable.
Yes, if you're doing what the world wants, they're fine with you. But the minute you do something that is opposite to the world, you are hated.
Yep.
And that has been the story of my life. And so when I heard you guys say that today, I was like, wow, I'm like, these are my people. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I very much identified with that.
Well, and that's what
That's God's people.
we've had.
The reason I say that is because when we read the Bible, you know what? For 5 years, I'll just say this: 5 years, Wanetta and I, we tried to be married. We cared about each other. We loved each other. We respected one another. But you know what? We were not saved. We did not have Christ. We spent 5 years trying to make it work. You know, if anybody had a chance of making it work, I think we probably had a pretty good chance. But it didn't. It absolutely took Christ to salvage our marriage and to build a foundation that we could truly love one another and work together and have a future.
And what's funny is both of us have powerful personalities. And you should talk to some of our staff. They crack up at us. Sometimes they leave. But and that's because we work together. You know, for the most part, we get along. But when we both have a strong opinion, we'll address each other.
Yeah. I have a question. Did you guys go to all the town halls that Lynn had? And how did those town halls come about?
We did not. They were always at a time when it was really hard.
For you?
Work on Saturday.
We're a mom and pop
day.
business, and anytime they do things on Saturdays, it is impossible because that is our busy day.
Okay.
I went to one with Eilena, and I basically just left Kevin in charge on a Saturday morning. It's hard to get away. But I went to one, and I stood up and said something, and Eilena did too. And of course, you had the library people scattered around talking. At that point, Lynn said, he said, you guys are going to all have to get along. You're going to have to get along. That was before, which that's reasonable for Lynn to say, well, everybody's got to get along. But that was before it came out what all was exactly in there. As time went on, I think, people began to see what was in there.
What was in there. Yeah,
Yes.
So I think it's really important.
Yes.
David Rice does that. He's exposing these books, and
Yes.
it's very painful to look at them.
Oh, yeah.
It's painful.
It's painful to listen to him read it. Sometimes
Yes.
there was one time he was reading them out loud, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this
So
is horrible."
he's doing the work of exposing it, and
Yes.
that's good. But
Yes.
why do you think there's so much vitriol and ill will? Because they, on the quote unquote opposition side, there is, we get called bigots, we get called white nationalists, Nazis. I know Mary got up and spoke and said, we are actually a diverse group.
Yes.
White, black, Hispanic,
Yeah.
gay, Christian. We're a diverse group that just all agree on protecting children, but we're being characterized as something very, very different. Also, the press is very, very. They have a narrative that comes down to them from the national level to the state level to the
Right.
local level,
Yes.
and they
Got
go
their
right
talking
along,
points.
and they print the most egregious untruths.
Yes.
And you just, how do you handle that? How do you handle a situation where it seems like there's just a kind of a flood coming against you?
It's not personal. It affects us personally, but it's not personal. Reggie Mitchum, he preached a sermon just a few weeks ago, and the sermon was, why did they hate Jesus? And when they hated Jesus, the reason they did, if you'd asked them, they probably wouldn't have been able to answer. But basically, the reason they hated Jesus was simply because he loved them enough to come and try to give them a better way. And then, of course, after Christ was crucified, they still weren't satisfied. And the Apostle Paul, he tried to show them a more excellent way. And God's people, God doesn't send us out here to tell everybody, you have to be like me, you have to do what I do, you have to be this, you have to be that. God basically tells us, he gives us the guidelines of how to live a good, long, healthy, prosperous life. It doesn't happen because we're sinful by nature. And these people that come against us, one of the hardest things to do is to accept the fact that I've messed up. None of us want to apologize. None of us want to say we're wrong. That's hard. And that's where the root of that is pride, because we want to feel like we're perfect and there's nothing wrong with us. It's them. It's them. It wasn't me. I didn't do that. They caused that. And, just generally, God's people, Christians, accept the fact that we are sinful and that we have faults and we have flaws and we have need for someone to save us. And once we come to that point, then that kind of relieves us of that responsibility. You know what? I'm not out to tell the world I'm perfect or that I have the answer for everything. I'm out to tell the world that I have the answer. I can tell them who does, who is perfect. And, I was 25 before I ever accepted Christ. And up until I was 25, I was bound, determined to prove I could do everything myself. I could do it right, and I was better than everybody else. And you know what? I had to come to the point where I realized, you know what? I am so wretched. I am such a failure. I have not the ability to accomplish these things that I thought I could do. And when I came to that point that I gave that to Christ, and I said, I need help. You know what? He accepted my apology, and he gave me a gift that I didn't deserve. And when he did that, you know what? I began to realize I did have some value. You know, it wasn't that I didn't have any value, but the value was that he was willing to go to the cross and die for me to have a restored relationship with him. And that, you know what? How can I be angry at anybody else that's doing the same thing or is in the same place? I want the same thing for them. I want them to be whole. I want them to be complete. I want them to have a joyful, prosperous, happy life. And that's the thing about America. America's always been that nation where people have come. You know, your poor huddled masses. You know, we know all these sayings, we know all these words, but the reality is there's never been a nation where the whole world could come and they could be part of something, that freedom to be everything we can be. And it's not a big puzzle why someone gets mad if they haven't come to that point where they realize that. Because like I said, I spent years outside trying to do it myself. And I can remember how angry I got and how mad I'd get. And I tried to blame everybody else. But you know what? The problem, it wasn't God. It was me. And it's not these people.
It's very much. I'm not usually as nice as him. I get really irritated. You see me irritated. It's very much demonic. You know, Ephesians 6 talks about you're not fighting against flesh and blood. You really are fighting against unseen spirits.
Yes.
A whole army of them.
Yes, and they're just influencing others,
Oh,
just
very
as
much
we've
so.
been influenced. You know, so really the choice is who, you know, choose you this day, whom you will serve.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and then choose life.
Yes.
And I think so many of us don't even recognize what life is or what that choice is, and so we go with something that is deceiving us, really. And who wants to admit that? Who wants to ever admit that?
I always try to stop short of. I try to be very truthful because we need to be truthful. There's nothing wrong with being truthful, and you can be truthful forcefully. But it's like with me, I always try to set a standard. It's not helpful. It's not valuable or useful. It's not godly to call people names like we're called. You know, and I always try not to do that. I always try to just be very truthful. Mm-hmm. And they still have a really hard time with it and call us haters. So
Right. Where do you think we're headed with the library at this point? It's been quite a journey. We've gathered together. There's many different people who've come together. We're all very different.
Oh yeah.
You know, but we've come together to protect children. I mean, I think it's a godly thing that we're doing is trying to protect children. But where are we at now with this?
We just have to walk it out. I think this is a done deal because we're not going to stop. We're not going to stop. And I think that God's in it, and it is a done deal. And we just have to walk it out. And the neat thing about this, and I've talked to you about this, Gretchen, I really think that we've organized. You know, this has been a real exercise in figuring out, because the thing about conservatives is we all just want to kind of mind our own business. We want to do our own thing.
We're all independent.
Yeah, we're independent. We don't want to get into other people's business. That's the last thing we want to do. But sometimes things go a bridge too far.
Mm-hmm.
And you realize that those days are over and you have to start getting involved. And I think that the other side has been organizing for years. I think that this is the beginning of figuring out how to do our own organizing.
Do you think it's going to go beyond the library?
Oh gosh, yes. Oh yeah,
Uh-oh.
I do.
I
I see
think,
more hope for America than I have in my whole life.
yeah.
I see so many young people that they've lived in this, and you know what? Juanita mentioned this morning that the pendulum swings,
Oh yeah.
and anytime when you get a generation that's been raised by people that have had drug problems, that have had multiple marriages, they've never had a good family life, they're out there in the world and they're tossing to and fro and they're looking for something stable. That bunch, when they rebel, well, you know what? They go the other way. When you rebel against your parents, which were naturally rebellious, then they're naturally going to do that. And besides that, we're living in a time now where I think the church, the remnant, is rising.
Oh yeah.
I think the truth is coming out. God has revealed so many things
yes.
to us recently. We didn't realize where we were. We didn't realize how dark it had gotten around
I agree.
us.
I think when you talk about kids and sexualizing children, it's the last kind of frontier for everyone,
Yes.
where they're like, wait a second, that's something that no matter what, I will not accept.
Yes.
On a global scale, like the P. Diddy thing, or Epstein's Island, or all kinds of stuff coming out in national news where they're being predatory towards children and sexually abusing children and sex trafficking, and all this stuff is coming out nationwide. And now that's kind of where most people, they're like, that's the line I cannot cross. Like, oh, if you want to love whoever, I don't care. Or, oh, you shouldn't say mean things or whatever. You're hurting children, actively hurting children. That's most people, they're like, that's the line in the sand.
Right, and
it's waking them up to other issues where they're like, wait a second.
Yeah, and I think Jesus really got very angry
Yes.
about harming children. That was,
Right.
ooh boy, if you wanted
Yes.
to get in trouble with him, that's
It would be
where
better
you
that
go.
they have a millstone hung around
Yes.
their neck and be thrown into the sea.
Yes.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, did you all think that the book of your life would have this library chapter in it?
No, but Kevin told me something. We mentioned that this morning. Kevin told me one day, he said, because we're 64, we're about to turn 65. And he said, you know what? He said, everything that has happened has been for this time. We're here for this time.
Yeah.
And what's really cool, and that just puts a whole new spin on it. What's really cool is everywhere we go, people that come into our place of business, it's amazing. We all know the same thing. There's people always say, well, I have a hard time understanding the Holy Spirit, the Trinity. What is the Trinity? 3 in 1. Jesus prayed, Father, let them be one as we are one. We're one right now. We all know God's talking to Christians all around the globe. Every day, we saw somebody yesterday we hadn't seen for years. He was kind of a wild guy when we knew him before. Man, you should have heard him. He is completely, all the things that we know, he knows. God's pouring into his heart too. It's like little campfires are lit in all the Christians everywhere. It's happening all at once. Father, let them be one as we are one. We're one now. We're becoming one. It's amazing. That's the Holy Spirit at work.
Oh, and the funny thing is I took my granddaughters yesterday to go see one of the final performances of Esther down in Branson.
Yes.
And, here we are, Esther 4:14. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place.
Yes.
But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
Yes.
And of course, what was said this morning, for such a time as this. And you just,
Wow.
I'm seeing more and more these confirmations from the Lord you'll think a scripture will come to you, and then it gets confirmed, like not
too.
once or twice.
Me too.
I mean, you just get inundated with the confirmation of it.
Yeah.
So he's really doing a work, and it's like a big, huge uprising. You can feel it in your spirit, you know.
Yes.
There are little campfires around the world that are being built, and it's amazing. It is truly amazing. Every day we see it, here.
Well, the book of Acts, the beginning of the modern church, the book of Acts, it came in just bang, and just so many things happened. Things moved so quick, and the gospel spread so fast.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm not being prophetic here. I just look at the book of Acts and I see the beginning of the church, and I can't help but think if that's how the church came in, you know what, that's how the church is going to build towards the end.
Yeah.
And we're going to see some amazing things. It's just a matter of
This
time.
is when the bride becomes
Yes.
beautiful.
Mm.
And people have a hard time. Everybody's so, I have a hard time with some Christians because they're like, well, I guess there's nothing we can do. We knew it was going to be this way. We just need to keep watching the skies for Jesus. Yes. Yes, we do. Yes. Jesus is coming back. I hope he comes back soon. That would be great.
Yeah.
It would be great if he came back, this week or next month or next year. But if he tarries, we are responsible for what goes on down here.
Yeah.
What's bound on earth will be bound in heaven. We have some responsibility and some authority. Jesus is coming for a beautiful bride, free of spot, wrinkle, or blemish. The church has got to stand up. We've got to shed those blemishes and those wrinkles. And we've got to stand beside the Father.
And kind of a simple analogy, picture, you've got 5 kids. Picture when you pull in the driveway, you get home, you left them all with some tasks to do.
Mm-hmm.
You see some eyes, you see the curtains pull back, and you see them peek out, and you see the scurrying, and you see all at once the lights all go off, and you go in and they're all tucked in bed and quiet. You know what? That's not what Jesus wants to come back for. He wants to come back and he wants to see us doing and accomplishing those things. That moment he comes, hopefully, we'll all be doing those things that he's set for us, and then he can be proud of his children.
He said, I'm going to build my church. He told Peter,
Yes.
I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail
That's right.
against it. Jesus was not a liar. He told the truth. So we
He
need to
is the
stand up.
truth.
Jesus,
Yes.
Jesus died for us. We need to live for
For
him.
him.
Yes.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
I did want to touch, because you guys have kind of been on a few of my TikToks, more than a few. I appreciate the the content there. Yeah, I really appreciate it. As well as Alina. But in your last public comment at the library, Kevin, you said, how did we get here? And that really struck me. I mentioned it during the Reggie interview. It's a question that's tumbling around in my head, and I just wanted to know, what's your answer to that question?
How did we get here?
How did we get here?
We went to sleep. We didn't go about the Father's work. We weren't obedient, and we weren't loving. The 2 commandments God gave us, Jesus himself, he spoke. He said, he was asked, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind. Are we living our lives when people look at us, they see that in us? And the other thing is love your neighbor as yourself. This is part of loving our neighbors, because we don't want these children destroyed. We don't want these people drug into this darkness. We don't want them to have these problems. You know what? We're not here to tell them what to do. Jesus doesn't come. God has the power. He can come in and say, all right, this is what you're going to do. He can set us down and force us to do each and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't. He allows us to join him. And I just want the world to join him. And you know what? That's our role, is to be a witness and to be kind and good enough and love enough to go ahead and speak the truth very bluntly and very boldly, and let these people know what's going to happen to them if they don't turn from these ways. We can't allow these people. What's God's word say about what happens to someone that harms these children? Mm-hmm. We don't want them guilty of that.
No, I don't. I
It's
don't
always-
like thinking of anybody with a millstone. You know?
No. So, yes. So you guys are the owners and operators of the Small and Civil War Cave, which I've had the unique and wonderful time there when we visited. So can you guys tell us a little bit about the cave, what hours you're open, and when, kind of the services you offer, the tours and stuff?
Yes, we're open. We're open all year long, but during January and February, when it's cold and tourist season is pretty much depleted, at that point we ask folks to call us and reserve. But yeah, from March all the way through the end of December, we're open 9:30 to 5 Monday through Saturday, 1 to 5 on Sunday. And at this point, you would not have to reserve a tour unless you had a big group. If you've got a pretty good sized group, groups of 10 or more people, we can do a discount. But yeah, we're doing tours daily right now.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And you guys got a gift shop and everything too, so definitely make sure you can stop in even if you don't have time for a cave visit. They have lots of local artisans have items. I remember when I went to the gift shop, Jamie Greg had his little tops in there.
Yes.
That was super cool. I didn't know he was a craftsman like that. So you guys have lots of cool stuff in there too for holidays coming up.
Yes, and a lot of great history, a lot of great Civil War history. It's just amazing how deep the history is here in this area of Missouri, and the cave tour is amazing.
I know, it was the best.
Yeah.
It's good because, every state had its own story during the Civil War. And it is because we're so far removed from it now, there's so much, we're getting to be an older country, there's so much more, that they cram in to teach history that it's become somewhat homogenized. And it's wonderful to learn the specific, unique history of the state of Missouri, and that's what we try to do.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Everybody knows Missouri Civil War history. They just don't realize it because it was so rough around here, so bad, and so many terrible things happened. The border wars, the Civil War, the Bald Knobber era, law and order lost. The moral of every old Westerns, don't go to town, there'll be trouble. Well, in the Ozarks, we figured that out. And the settling of the West came through Missouri, and it was that lack of law and order through those years that began to become very apparent as the West was settled. It's amazing how many people that had lived through all those terrible things were part of building communities as everything went west.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep, that's right. Well, I've been down here twice. I've gone through the tour twice, and you learn every time you come, you're learning something new, and it's just really interesting.
I tell you, we put our guides through a lot of training, and I've worked at other caves, and they all have training that they have to go through. Our poor cave guides have to learn so much history because that's kind of our shining star.
Yeah.
We were actually placed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2018, so it's important.
Oh,
they
very
need
much
to
so.
represent the true history.
And when you go and you look at that ginormous mouth of the cave, and you can just see how that cave was going to be used by Native Americans and also by Civil War soldiers, and it's impressive. Now, is there anything that we've left out that you'd like to add?
Yeah.
There's so much.
I know you could go for hours and hours.
Well, and it's an important time, but I guess one thing that I would like to just say to encourage everybody, this isn't necessarily for the interview, but as God's people have come together with everybody else, this isn't just God's people in this movement, because what you said is very true. Anybody is okay with a child being harmed needs to not be in our society, and I don't care what society it is, but if you're not protecting your children,
that's the basic
you have
level.
no society.
Exactly.
So the fact that they're openly coming in and willingly causing harm to our children, that in itself is bringing our community together.
That's true.
And Christians, a lot of people say we're judgmental and everything, but you know what? A good Christian community, I know so many people that were not Christian that were always a part of a community I was in. And we're not there to make them feel bad or cause them harm. You know what? We're just kind of what you said about conservatives, just kind of live and let live. And if they got questions, we'll answer. But you know what? We don't force anybody to do anything. God doesn't tell us to do that.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
It's just an honor and a pleasure to know you guys, and
The same. We feel the same.
Yes.
so
Yeah.
This is community.
This is good. I'm glad you're doing this too, because
Yes.
people are not watching. People are on YouTube. People
No,
are
I
on
know.
the internet. They're
Yeah.
watching. They are looking.
they don't like reading. So
They're
much.
looking for things to watch and
Yes,
listen to.
yes,
We
true.
figured out we can't listen to the news because it's a bunch of lies.
Yeah, it is.
So we're going to turn to our friends in our community and learn some stuff.
Yep.